first female guests. That's a first for us.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've had people, or my listeners have been saying, how come you don't have any female guests on? I guess because I have a lot of female listeners, and it's not being biased to the listeners out there. It's just all the researchers that I've been having on Cryptic Knowledge Radio, they just have been happening to be male. I hate to say it, Tildy and Tina, there's not many people or not many female researchers out there just like yourselves. I guess you consider yourself researchers, do you? Or well, give us a title. What do you title yourselves?
Well, it's interesting because we never considered ourselves authors because we never had any intention of writing a book. But here we are now. We've channeled a book. And we must say that since we've channeled this book, we both have been doing a lot of research on what's happening on this planet, what's out there, because this book just split our heads wide open. I would almost call us spiritual seekers. Mm-hmm. That one was for me.
So is that Tina speaking or that Tildy speaking?
That was both of us. We sound a lot alike, so this might get a little confusing for you.
It's fine.
We finish each other's sentences at time as well, but we'll try and let you know who's speaking when, just so you can.
Okay, great.
And this is Tina. Well, now it is.
Okay. So I really, this is the first time I've also had, of course, female guests on and multiple guests on at the same time. So I'm a little new at this, and I've only been doing radio for a couple months, so I need you two to help me out whenever. So if I ask a question, I guess whoever believes that they can answer it the best that they can, I'm sure both of you can, but just try to work it out amongst yourselves and just try to come up with the answer when I ask you a question, if that's okay.
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
And
tell us a little bit.
Sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say that we love your accent, by the way. You said that people tease you about your accent. We love your accent. Don't ever lose
thank you very much.
I was just thinking that.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of my listeners, they pick on me, but it's in a friendly way. I get it all the time. It's here down the South, we don't really pick on each other because that'd be just like picking on ourselves, you know. So it's normally people that don't live around here that do the picking, but it's all friendly and everything. I could be talking about you guys like up north, but you know that's a different story. But
we probably have an accent to you.
A little bit. Where y'all coming from? Or where y'all live?
Yeah, we're in Vancouver.
Okay.
We're Pacific Northwest.
Okay. Oh, speaking of Vancouver, I know we only have an hour with y'all, but speaking of Vancouver, you know that's where the X-Files was the studio the X-Files was.
Yes, I did some work on the X-Files. This is Tina, and I also work in the film business. So way back when, I was doing some background work, and I remember doing some work on the X-Files too. So yeah, we're very familiar with the X-Files up here.
Well, nice. I didn't know that. You are my new best friend because I love the X-Files. I wish they would come up with another movie, and I hear that they're going to come out with a 2012 movie sometime soon. But right now it's just a rumor, though. But tell us a little bit about how you got into this work, A Book of Insight, and why did you call it Wisdom from the Other Side?
Well, this is Tina speaking. It goes back, I guess it goes back to our childhood because Tildy and I have both had very interesting experiences. For instance, even as a child, I was having out-of-body experiences. I used to have invisible friends. I remember Tildy had an incident with a tree, a nature spirit in her youth, and I was visited by a white light being when I was a teenager, and Tildy's also had a lot of very similar experiences. So our interest was piqued at a very early age. You know, very early on we realized once we got more rooted in this three-dimensional world that a lot of these experiences that were happening to us were considered not normal. They were considered out of the ordinary and paranormal in nature. When I was a teenager, we moved from Toronto to Vancouver, and we lived with our grandparents for a couple of years. And there was a Ouija board there, and I never knew what a Ouija board was. I'd never seen it before. So as I got older, I started experimenting with it. And when Tildy became a teenager, I'm older than her, we started experimenting with it together. And that was our first introduction to the Ouija board. And we've just been working with it throughout our whole lives. And we've met our spirit guides through our Ouija board. And one day in 2004, they announced that they were going to give us a book. They started channeling a page on meditation. And it was at that time that they told us that it was the beginning of our book.
Yeah, we basically, this is Tildy now, we basically developed a relationship with these three spirit guides through the Ouija board, and this relationship went on for a number of years, probably over 25 years now, dare I say. It's been a while. And as Tina was saying, at one point in 2004, there goes my memory, they started to, they came through and they began delivering material to us on meditation. And at the end of this session, they told us that this was meant to be the beginning of chapter 1 of our book. And this was the first we'd ever heard of them planning to deliver a book to us. So we actually didn't take it very seriously. And it wasn't until 3 years later that we followed up on it. And we asked them if they wanted to continue with it, and that was all they needed to hear. And they just picked up right where they left off 3 years previous. And at that time, they told us that they were going to deliver a book to us. The title was to be A Book of Insight, and they told us that it would contain 16 chapters. And they wouldn't give us any more information than that. We would ask them, well, what's this book going to be about? What's the subject matter? They wouldn't tell us anything other than a title and 16 chapters. And we knew that chapter 1 was going to be on meditation. And that was the beginning of it.
I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I'm going to go into all that here in a minute. But for those who are listening or who may be listening when they download the show or the archive, explain what the Ouija board is. Because there are a few out there who don't even know what a Ouija board is. And I'm not one of them, but, there's a few who, I had a few emails from my listeners. Actually, I had one email that asked me, what is a Ouija board? And I was like, just Google it, but we might have a few listeners that are like, what is a Ouija board? So just explain it in the details, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a really good question because we often take for granted that the listeners know what a Ouija board is. But what it is, it's basically a very thin piece of wood. It's maybe an eighth of an inch or a quarter of an inch in thickness. And it's maybe a couple feet long and, I don't know, like a foot
and a half
wide.
Mm-hmm.
And it has letters on it. It has all the letters of the alphabet. And it also has the word yes and the word no spelled out.
And numbers, 1 to 0.
Yeah. And it comes with a little pointer, or what is also referred to as a planchette. And 2 or more people place their hands on this pointer. It's just made of plastic. And you place your hands on it, and you just wait. And if all goes according to plan, it will start to move, and it will start to spell out words. And so, Tina and I refer to this as a communication tool. That's basically how we use it. For listeners that are familiar with the Ouija board, we know that there have been a lot of negative stories about Ouija boards, too, where, we've heard stories where people claim to have contacted an evil spirit, and they've had hauntings and things of that nature. Now, I suppose that could happen if you're not careful with it, if you treat it as a game, if you're not respectful of it. Personally, I've never met a person. I've never heard a first-hand account of a person having had such an experience, but, I suppose it is possible. But when Tina and I work with the Ouija board, what we do is we make a point of saying a little prayer of protection before we begin. We surround ourselves with an imaginary white light of protection as well, and we have very positive intent anytime we begin a session. We know exactly who it is we want to contact. And that's very important, because if you're playing with a Ouija board and you're just randomly trying to contact anything, well, you don't know what will show up. And so this is,
Exactly.
and this is basically how the book was delivered to us, was using the Ouija board, having our spirit guides, for the most part, spell out the entirety of the book to us. However, because Tina and I have been working with the Ouija board for so many years, we've gotten to the point where it's a combination of the guides spelling out all the material and a combination of us channeling it, receiving the information, being able to anticipate what's coming next. And if ever we get we anticipate something and we've gotten it wrong, they're very quick to let us know, no, that's not what we meant, and then they'll respell it for us. And
I just don't. I've never seen one in person, but I've heard a bunch of accounts, and most of them were negative. But I'll go into that in a minute. But I just don't understand how the board works. Like, what is it that creates this portal to the other side?
Well, what we do, what Tildy and I do before each session, and this is what our guides told us to do, is to have a meditation session. So we meditate. Now, the reason we meditate is because they tell us that it helps us to basically get in the zone and to raise our frequency, because our spirit guides need to lower their frequency. They meet us halfway. And usually it takes 2 or more people, and each person puts their hands or her hand on the plastic pointer very lightly. And with time and practice, it will start to move. And what it will do is it will move and point to various letters as it's spelling out its message to you. And it was very popular during the spiritualist age, I think in the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm. And so basically what it is, in our case, it's these 3 spiritual entities that come through and deliver material to us, who are lowering their vibration so that their energy can connect with us, as Tina was just explaining, so that they can use their energy to help guide the planchette. Because when we have our hands on it, we feel that it's being moved. It's their energy combining with our energy that's helping to move this planchette and guide it to very specific letters. Yeah, and oftentimes we'll have spirits come through that are often very, very excited to be there, and there are times when the planchette or the pointer will just start to move very quickly and almost out of control, just because their energy, the spirit energy, is so revved up, and they're putting so much of their energy into it. So it's basically a combination of their energy connecting with our energy that's helping to guide the planchette.
Can spirits or entities communicate in other objects such as teddy bears and other electronic devices other than the Ouija board?
I've heard of them affecting electronic devices. And that's actually quite common. You hear of that in situations where perhaps a house is haunted, and oftentimes because it's easier for them to affect electric energy, because I mean we're electromagnetic energy, they're made up of that energy, so it's easy for them to affect it. And oftentimes it'll be things like they're affecting the lights. If you have a radio or a television set going, they can affect that as well. Turn it on, turn it off, things of that nature. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Does it have to be the board, or could you use anything that had letters and numbers on it? Like, what is it about the board per se? Like, was it the way it was built? Like, who built it? And can you use anything other than just the Ouija board?
Sure, you don't have to use the Ouija board. For Tina and myself, it just so happens that this communication tool works very well for us. You could build your own.
Yeah.
You don't. I mean, Ouija is just a patented. It's a trademark. It's a name that's trademarked. But you could make your own communication tool similar to a Ouija board. by just, buying the piece of wood, stenciling letters on it, making a pointer. And then we have psychics and mediums who use things like tarot cards, crystal balls, rune stones, and any of these are just different communication tools that you can use that will help you to connect. But the one thing that our guides really stress very much throughout the book is to meditate, because through meditation you will help to develop your psychic abilities and your intuitive abilities so that you're not reliant on the tools alone. Because as spiritual beings, and this is something we've forgotten, we are all psychic. Whether we realize it or not, we all have psychic senses, and that's a very natural part of who and what we are. And it's just a matter of really taking the time to practice that skill set to develop it. But this is something as the children are very tuned into. Oftentimes you'll see little children who are playing with their invisible friends, and their friends are invisible to us as adults, but to children this is something that's very real, because they're much more tuned into it because they haven't been, they don't understand the rules between the three-dimensional world and the spiritual world yet. No one's told them that there are rules per se that exist.
Well, when I used to see invisible friends as a young child, I never knew that we weren't really supposed to see these things. They were very real to me. I remember at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd go into my parents' bed, and I would just lie there and summon my friends to come out of the darkness of the walls and to entertain me as I fell asleep. And all these cartoon-type characters would emerge from the walls and just put on these little shows for me until I just fell asleep. And when I was a kid, I didn't know that we weren't really supposed to see these things. I think children are still rooted in the spiritual world, and they're not totally rooted in the three-dimensional world until we become older and we become older children and teenagers and adults, and then we're more rooted in this reality.
Yeah. But in reality, pun intended, it actually is very normal to be able to communicate with the unseen world. It's a very natural part of who we are, because we have to remember we are spiritual beings above and beyond anything else.
Exactly.
Eventually we cross over and we shed our physical bodies. We came here as spiritual beings and we cross over as spiritual beings. That's who we are. So it actually is very normal for us to see these things and to be able to communicate with them. But it's almost as if it's been programmed out of us as we begin to get older.
Exactly. We are spiritual beings until we cross over. You couldn't have said anything perfectly, but what many might say, what are we crossing over into? Well, what is it?
Well, our
true home.
Our true home, and our guides would tell us it's another dimension as well. Because what many of us don't realize is that there's a lot more than just this three-dimensional reality that we're focused in right now, but the universe is multi-dimensional, and they tell us that within these many dimensions exist many life forms as well, that we're not the only ones here. Even within our dimension, within our galaxy, there are other life forms that exist that we just haven't really tuned into yet. But the universe is full and vibrant and alive, and there are many quantum physicists as well who would tell us that, well, perhaps we live in a multiverse as well. We think we live in only one universe, or that only one universe exists, but it's quite likely that there is a multiverse that exists as well.
This is pretty much just a theory of mine, what I'm about to say, and I guess if you want to go ahead and be my guest and try to help me out, because about it, whenever I found out my show, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I started thinking, like, when we cross over, when we become spiritual beings or ghosts or whatever you want to call it, is that just, let me say, is that like a holding process until we are reincarnated?
Well, our guides tell us that, we don't necessarily reincarnate all the time, because there are many levels of learning when we cross over as well. So it's not necessarily a holding place, because there are also many entities who never reincarnate into physical form. Physical form is just one of a multitude of numbers of forms that exist. We're told that there are entities that exist that are strictly cerebral. It's almost like they're just thought forms, in essence, and they've never reincarnated physically. And also, we don't reincarnate just into this dimension that we're aware of, this physical one, but many of the off-planet cultures, or alien, whatever you want to call them, I personally prefer off-planet cultures, we've also reincarnated into those life forms as well. So there's we view our reality from a very limited perspective, but our guides tell us that there's so much more going on than what we could even imagine.
How long did it take to go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to add to what Tilly's saying, and to help people understand this whole concept of multiverses and other dimensions, is our guides took us back to the beginning. There's a chapter in the book called The Source. And they basically said that in the beginning, the Source, or God as we refer to the Source, existed as a singularity, which is one massive unit of loving, self-aware consciousness. And the Source wanted to understand all of what it could be. And in having that question and that desire to understand itself, it exploded forth into the answer. And we are part of that answer. And the Source exploded forth and created everything that exists, and in what we refer to as the Big Bang. And it sent out fragments of itself, which are source souls. And these fragments of itself, source souls, also sent out fragments of themselves. And we are basically, you, I, the listeners, everybody that exists, and even the animals, because animals have souls, are all fragments of the Source having an experience on behalf of the Source. And not only having that experience on this dimension, but having the experience on as many levels as it possibly could, in order for it to fully be aware of itself and to fully understand all of what it could be. What they told us is that the Source is on a quest of self-actualization, and we are all part of the Source's quest, and the Source experiences through us. Because we are fragments of God having a human experience, we are experiencing everything on behalf of God or on behalf of the Source. And that's basically the reasoning behind it all.
Nicely said. Explain what the underlying law of nature is.
Well, that would be magnetism. Our guides tell us, and there's a chapter on magnetism in the book, and basically what the guides are saying is everything is magnetic in nature. Energy is magnetic in nature. The Source's energy is magnetic in nature. And what that means is that magnetism or energy either attracts or repels. And we've all heard of the law of attraction, for instance. That's all part of the magnetic nature of the Source. And because we are fragments of God, we are divine, and we have access to God or the Source's energy and power. And that energy or power is all magnetic in nature, and it's all part of the energetic field. And so our thoughts, our belief systems, they all have energy or magnetic energy. And our guides tell us, do you ever notice how negative things always happen to negative people? That's because they are creating their negative reality through the law of attraction or magnetism, which either attracts or repels situations. I think Tilly wants to add something to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add also that what our guides tell us is that magnetism is basically a tool that we use to create, because as fragments of the Source being the ultimate creator, we are here as creators. And we're creating our reality from moment to moment every day of our lives, whether we realize we're doing that or not. That's what we're doing. And magnetism is the energy or the tool that we use to create our reality. And so our guides tell us that it's very important to be aware of your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, all of this, because all of these things have magnetic energy attached to them, and they will affect the outcome of your reality, whether you realize it or not. So it's very important to be aware.
Does the board work better in unison with astrological features such as the stars, planets, the moon?
Not that we've noticed. Whenever we sit down to do a session, we put our hands on it. Right now, it automatically just starts moving. What we do find is that if we don't meditate before a session, we don't have as good of a session, or we don't have as good of a communication session. But if we meditate beforehand, we usually have better sessions. But we haven't actually, and maybe it's because we haven't consciously taken the time to notice astrologically what's going on whenever we do our sessions. But it would be interesting to do that and try and see if it does affect it.
Yeah, the reason why I ask that is because, you know, we watch all these paranormal shows like Ghost Hunters and stuff like that, and they always say, I'm not an expert on it by no means. I actually haven't had any guests talking about ghosts yet. Well, I guess y'all are the first ones talking about spirits and everything, but they always talk about whenever it's best to go ghost hunting whenever there's a full moon or whenever the solar flare. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, like when there's like whenever the sun is acting up, like I forgot what you call it. Whenever the sun's acting strange and producing more solar flares, and they say that's the time to go ghost hunting, and that's the reason why I asked, because it would make sense if that's true and spirits, entities are coming out better because there's more energy in the air. It would make sense to, I guess, maybe you would get better feedback and maybe more answers or anything like that whenever you're using the Ouija board during those times.
Right, right. I think it's quite possible, because when you talk about the solar flares, there's certain energy that's given off at those particular times. Also with the moon, I mean, full moon is very powerful. It's so powerful that it affects the tides, and I know it also affects people's emotions at times as well. So I think it's quite logical. It makes sense to me that these things would also affect the energy on, you know, in a spiritual manner as well, if you're trying to connect with the other side. I mean, Halloween is another time that I know the Wiccans talk about how that time of year is the time of year where they say that the veil between the two worlds is the thinnest, and communication with the other side is much easier. And of course, right around the same time, we have, what is it, the Day of the Dead? Is that what that other holiday is called? And so, yeah, it's interesting. I do believe that there are earthly cycles that do affect things energetically.
Oh yeah. I mean, in my research, what I've discovered, and you probably are aware of this too, is that group that's known as the Illuminati uses these energy cycles to operate within. So it would make sense that if we utilize those energy cycles to our advantage, we must be able to do so as well. And it would make sense that possibly if we do any readings or do any sessions during these sessions, these cycles, it would make sense that the energy would possibly affect. You know, we should try.
Wow, I've really never thought of it like that. I don't mean to get on too much of the Illuminati and secret society and the elite of the world, but I don't mean to get on that. But I got to ask, you know, like that really does seem very possible, because it's because we know the elite of the world and the Illuminati, whoever you want to call it, the secret societies, or you know who we consider the world elite. Maybe they are they are doing the opposite of what you two are doing, and they're tapping in to the evil aspects, because of course we all hear that if you like through evil, you know, you may can get a few good deeds out of evil, but in the long run it's going to catch up to you, you know. And do you think that the leader or the Illuminati or whoever it is, do you think that they could be tapping in to something like the Ouija board on like a negative aspect of the whole deal?
Well, quite possibly. I mean, you can use this energy for positive means, or you could use it for negative means. I mean, it depends on what your agenda is. I think if you use it for negative means, because energy is magnetic, you're eventually going to attract negativity back to you. And I think also, I mean, when we speak about spiritual evolution, I think you're probably moving yourself backwards, if anything.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, I would only ever suggest, if anyone's going to use a Ouija board or any other type of tool, I would only suggest that you ever use it for positive intent. If you have anything else in mind, I would just suggest to people to not even get involved, because you don't know what you're messing with, and yeah, it could be very, very scary, and ultimately it affects the person who's using the tool in that way.
Well, even our guides have told us, like for instance with meditation, when we're meditating, if you're using meditation for visualization and to visualize what you want to attract for yourself or for others, even our guides said to us in the Book of Insight, don't ever use this for negativity, because you will, in fact, attract that negativity onto yourself instead. Use it only for positive, loving purpose. And they are very clear about that. So even
it's like a boomerang.
Yeah.
In a sense. It's like if you put that kind of energy out there, whether it's positive or negative, that energy is like a boomerang. You put it out, but it will eventually come back and affect you, whether it's in a positive way or a negative way, depending on how you're working with this energy.
And again, we get back to that question. Do you ever notice how negative things always happen to negative people? You know?
Exactly,
So,
and just like I like the how you explain the boomerang thing, because you might throw it as hard as you can, and you're like, wow, it's going way out there, man, I can't believe I did that, and here it comes back towards you, about to hit you in the head. So,
when
but
you're not
how
listening,
long? Yeah,
It takes speed on the way back too, so be careful.
I probably should have asked this towards the beginning of the discussion, but how long did it take to channel all this information that you have in this book?
Well, the first session was in 2004, and that was one day, and then we did a little bit in 2007, but we got serious about it after New Year's 2008. So by the time we started and finished, it was a good three solid months. And once the information came through and we read it, we had a lot of questions. And then we asked the questions and got the answers and inserted that into the book. And the book actually reads like a dialogue, a question and answer dialogue between us and our guides. And any question that the reader would have reading this book will come up and they will be answered. And it's pretty amazing material, because there's 16 chapters in the book. And they've given us everything from meditation to belief systems to the source, a chapter on healing, a chapter on intuition, guides, love, laughter, emotions. There's a chapter on reality, a chapter on magnetism, alternate realities, the awakening of mankind, which is a really interesting chapter, hell, heaven, and then the future of mankind and what we have to look forward to as our future. So they really came forth and gave us a lot of information to deliver to people everywhere.
If you had to point one thing out that these guides are trying to tell you that we as a society need to better ourselves in, what would that one thing be that mostly your guides tell you that we need to do?
We need to wake up. We definitely need to wake up and realize what we're doing to this planet, and they basically have told us that we are at a crossroads right now. And we can either take the high road or the low road, and whatever road we take will affect our future. And do we want to develop as we are meant to into a spiritually loving being that we are meant to, or do we want to go down that negative road of hell?
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, mostly what they want us to do, they want us to wake up and to remember who we are. Because once we remember who we are, once we remember that we are divine spiritual beings, that we are the ultimate creators of our reality, once we wake up to that, and once we remember that, then we'll begin moving en masse in a more positive direction. Once we realize our divinity and the power that we have, the power that we have as creators, then that alone will start us moving in a more positive direction.
Yeah. Well, we've all fallen asleep, and we've forgotten who we are. And for people who read the Bible and are into, read about Jesus, what I would like to say is, even Jesus said, "What I can do, you can also, and more." And he meant it quite literally. And even when he said, "I am the Son of God," he meant that quite literally, because we are all sons and daughters of God, or sons and daughters of the Source. And that's what our guides want everybody on this planet to know, that we are all divine. We are all divine fragments of God having a human experience. And because of that, we are all able to access the energy of God, the energy of our Source, and that we are spiritually evolving, and we are meant to spiritually evolve, and that our future is a bright one, but we are in charge of our future. We have to remember that, and that our spiritual evolution is moving towards the opening of the third eye of humanity as we grow towards a spiritual aware future.
Exactly, and I have I'm sure you have heard this quote too, and it's explaining what you two have just been saying. Just look at us. This is by Michael Elner. Just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health. Lawyers destroy justice. Universities destroy knowledge. Governments destroy freedom. The major media destroys information, and religions destroy spirituality. That's by Michael Elner.
That's brilliant. I've heard that quote before, and he is right on the money with that. That's exactly what's happening right now. And yeah, I mean, yes, you don't need, religion as an example. You don't need religion to connect to God, to connect to your Source, because as spiritual beings, as fragments of the Source, that connection is automatic. We're born with that connection. We have had that connection since the beginning of time, and we will never lose that connection. And you don't need man-made structures, man-made religions in order to reach spirituality. That is just a given.
Yeah, because we are already spirit. We're just inhabiting a human form. And if you think of your body as the car you drive while you're on this planet, then it makes it easier to visualize that. That, we come to this earth, we drive this body, and when we're finished driving this body, we leave the body and just go back to where we came from. It's no different than the car you drive. Or when you get to your destination, you turn your car off, you get out of your car, and you go home. Well, that's what happens to us, too. And that we are definitely eternal. We don't die, we just transform from one form to another.
Yeah, it gets difficult living here in the South talking about religion, and especially Christianity, because I live in the Bible Belt here in the South, and I have a bunch of friends that are Christians and that go to church every Sunday and every Wednesday night, and they always ask me, like, why do you do those interviews? Why do you do that? Like you're going to hell and everything like that. But I always tell them, because I don't bash religion, or I don't bash Christianity. I don't bash anything or any form of faith like that. But there is a time where you need to take the training wheels off and grow up spiritually, because religion, one book, religion, or anything like that it's only going to prevent you from going so far, because you can only go so far. Yes, you can live a wonderful life how the Bible tells you to live, or other religions around the world. You can live a wonderful life, but I want more. I want more answers. I want to take the training wheels off and to explore my own spiritual path and awake as much as I can awake. I want to get a caffeine rush, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, our guides even say to us within the book that you know, religion at its very core has a good message. At a very fundamental level, the messages are positive. But what happens oftentimes is that, I mean, we have to remember that religion is something that is man-made, and oftentimes with man-made structures, you know, even within religion, there's a hierarchy, right? And at the very top, it starts to become more about power and control. And any time you have a man-made structure, there's always room for corruption as well. So it's important to take the positive messages from religion, because there are positive messages there. But like you said, you also at some point you have to take the training wheels off too, and you have to start exploring your own spirituality. You know, I mean, Tina and I grew up Catholic. That was our religion, and I know within our religion, you know, you didn't ask questions. You're supposed to just believe on faith. But it's important to ask questions, because that's how we learn. That's how part of how we develop ourselves, whether it's spiritually or as physical beings. It's all part of the learning process. Yeah. And it's important to ask questions.
Well, even as a child, when I went to Sunday school lessons, there was something inside my spirit, even as a child, that it didn't make sense. It didn't feel right. And as a Catholic, we have this rite called First Communion when we're 8 years old. And I remember shortly after my First Communion, I dropped out of Sunday school because I just didn't want to go anymore, because it didn't resonate within me as a child. So I think children are naturally born with that spiritual knowing within them, and then we get conditioned. So even as a child, it didn't feel right. And yes, I definitely took the training wheels off, and I think a lot of times that's what man-made religion is. It's training wheels for those of us who have not yet fully awakened spiritually. And when we're ready to awaken spiritually, we can take off the religious training wheels and then move forward into the next level of awakening, which is spiritual growth within ourselves.
Exactly. And I haven't been to church since, of course, many people, especially here in the South, we're all raised in church. And I haven't been since 2002 when I started researching some of this. And I get more spiritually, physically, mentally, and I get more out of listening to people like you, David Icke, all the other guests that I've had here at Cryptic Knowledge Radio. I get more out of listening to what you have to say than I do in a couple hours in a ceremony, you know, or at church.
You don't want to sleep either.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, we may not have all the answers, you know, but, well, one single person may not have all the answers, but all of us together has the answers. And that's why we all, like you, in my picture, you are a puzzle piece. David Icke is a puzzle piece. Bob Dean is a puzzle piece. Michael Tellinger, Michael Desarian, everybody else who I'm into and who I've researched, and they are a puzzle piece in my own picture. And then I connect all them pieces together, and they create a better image, you know, I guess, of a more of a spiritual path, if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. I like your description.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, and of course, you know, like you have to examine your own self. You have to pull out all the. You have to. I guess you have to say you have to have an open mind, but you can't have two of them open mind where your brains fall out. But just like I said, we all have the answers. We just have to be able to listen to one another and without having cognitive dissonance amongst each other and believing, like, because what I'm talking about to you right now, I can't go tell any of my Christian friends, and that's one thing how I believe many wars are created, because many say we all we all have different opinions on like certain topics and certain things like that, and then we have countries who are arguing amongst each other that their faith and their religion and they are right. And the main thing is we just have to be able to listen to each other and be able to, just like I said, use each other as a puzzle piece to create our own image.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. And I mean, if your faith is strong, then you shouldn't be afraid of asking questions and exploring outside of your faith too. You know, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to fall into line with everything new that you're learning. I mean, once you start exploring, you're going to come across pieces of the puzzle that really resonate with you as truth, and you're also going to come across pieces of the puzzles that don't quite feel right. And you just discard those ones. You know that, okay, that piece doesn't go with this puzzle that I'm putting together. But if your faith is strong, you shouldn't be afraid of that. You know, what do you have to fear, really? It's all a learning process, and you know, we have to begin to take the blinders off and start thinking outside of the box and exploring outside of the box, because right now most of us are caught up in a very limited perception of what our reality is, and oftentimes religion keeps you tied in that very limited perception as well. So there's nothing wrong with exploring.
Explain what happens to a person's spirit after death, according to how they live their life.
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm going to start with the topic of hell, because since we're on the topic of religion, I think hell would appropriately follow that. Now, a lot of us create our own realities through our thoughts and our belief system, and what our guides tell us is there is no hell other than the hell you have created for yourselves, and there is no devil other than the devil you've created for yourselves. And they say that we have lived in a world of heaven and hell, and this has been created by none other than ourselves. And they say that hell is that mythical place we believe that we go to where all bad and evil souls reside in. And they say that they don't go to hell, for hell is a creation of the imbalanced mind. So they say that when a soul is so attached to those thoughts and beliefs that they're going to go to hell, then when they cross over, they will in fact create a hell of their own imagination and then live in that hell of their own imagination. But they want us to realize that hell is an illusion, and that if we end up in that illusion of hell that we've created for ourselves, that there are guides that eventually will help pull us out of that illusion. But they say that our real home is heaven, what we call heaven, because that is where we come from. We come from the source. And when we die, we go back to the source. And that we really have to get off the topic of hell, because there is no hell.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly add to that, just to tie that in a little more. When our guides talk to us and tell us how each one of us is a creator, we're all fragments of the ultimate creator, well, when we cross over, we still continue to create our reality. We are still creators on the other side as well. And that's how it's possible that you could experience a hell when you cross over. If you truly believe that you were an evil person and that's where you're going, then you may create the illusion of that reality for yourself. But it is just that, an illusion.
I don't mean to sound skeptical by no means, but how do you know who to believe or know when a spirit is pulling your chain and having fun with the situation?
Well, you know, it's very good to be skeptical, and when this book was being delivered to us, Tina and I were very, very skeptical, and it took us a while. It wasn't till we were probably about halfway through the delivery of this book that we started to let go of that skepticism, and the reason we let go of it was because upon reading what was delivered to us, we knew that it felt right. And that's the thing. You have to go within, because we all have the answers within us. And you'll know if something is resonating within you as being truth, or whether or not, you know, something just doesn't sound right or it doesn't feel right to you. That's part of our intuition. That's part of the intuition is, I guess, a tool that our spirit uses. It's our radar system, and we all have this radar system, and we just have to practice it and use it. So our intuition told us that this material felt right to us. It was all very positive information. There was nothing in the book that we could look at and say, you know what, that I feel like we're being tricked here. It all really resonated to us in a very, very positive way, and that's the key. It has to feel right within.
Have any of your communications through the Ouija board mentioned anything about the year 2012?
Well, they tell us that basically what 2012 symbolizes is a spiritual awakening, but that's already happening. They want us to know that 2012 is not this magical point in time where suddenly the world's going to end or there's going to be doom and gloom. It is an awakening, and we are already in it. And there's signs of that everywhere. I mean, we're seeing that on the Internet. People are connecting with each other. They're awakening spiritually. They're discussing what's going on the planet, both politically, geopolitically, spiritually. So they basically say to us, don't worry. There's nothing to be worried about. It's a good thing. We're going through a spiritual evolution, and 2012 is just a barometer of that, I guess you can say. It's just a point in time, but it's already started and it's already happening now.
Do your guides know anything or know what's going to happen in the future? Of course, they probably wouldn't tell you word for word what's going to happen, because I guess that would interrupt free will and stuff like that. But do they act, I don't really know how to say it, but do they act like they know what's going to happen in the future, and that's why they're trying to warn us, to try to tell us that we need to wake up and we need to better ourselves spiritually, mentally, physically, to have a better future for our grandkids?
Well, what they tell us is that every probability imaginable exists. And you mentioned free will. Because of free will, we can always change the outcome. So no one knows for certain what the future will hold. Even our guides don't know for certain because of our free will. I mean, we are meant to evolve as spiritual beings. Ultimately, that is our true path, our awakening of our third eye, and our I guess you could call it our ascension into unconditional love, because ultimately that's what we're meant